So this is what you have been hiding from me. A leaking roof, cracked walls, a kitchen that has not been used in 20 years. This is your real life, Emeka. 3 months. 3 months I stayed because I believed in you. I told my family, this man is different. This man has character. But character does not pay rent. Character does not fix a ceiling. I am sorry. I cannot build my future in a ruin.
She did not know he was watching from the dark corridor at the end of the hall. She did not know the conversation was being recorded on a phone, placed on the windowsill before she arrived. She did not know that the peeling paint, the rusted tap dripping in the corner, the old photograph hanging crooked on the wall, none of it was real misfortune. All of it was a question. And she had just given her answer. She was not the last woman he would bring to that house, but she was the last one of her kind he would ever be fooled by. The woman who would give a different answer was at that moment sitting on the veranda outside the compound gate, having arrived early, waiting quietly rather than knocking twice and growing impatient. She had brought a small bunch of garden eggs wrapped in a polythene bag because she had passed a woman selling them on the road and thought a man living alone might not be eating well. She did not know he was a billionaire. She did not know she was being tested. She simply thought he might be hungry. This is the story of Emeka Adeyemi, a man who stopped trusting people before he finished building his fortune. The test he designed inside his father's broken house, and the woman who walked through every door of it and never once asked what was on the other side. Stay with this story until the end. What happens when the truth finally comes out will not be what you are expecting. And the woman who walked out of that old house so fast will spend years trying to understand what the woman with garden eggs already knew without thinking. There is a particular kind of wealth that carries the smell of sacrifice inside it. Emeka Adeyemi's wealth was that kind. He was 38, and he had not been born into any of it. His father had been a school teacher in Akure, a quiet and principled man who wore the same pair of brown shoes for 11 years because shoes were not where character lived. His mother had sold fabric from a stall in the market, rising before sunrise every day of a life that never gave her a day off. Emeka had watched both of them pour everything they had into one container. That container was him, not out of greed, out of love, the only way they knew how to show it. Give the child what we never had. He had not wasted it. By 32, he had started a construction company from a rented office the size of a pantry, and a reputation for finishing what he quoted. By 35, his name was on 3 bridges and a hospital wing. By 38, Adeyemi Properties was the kind of company that made men in meetings sit up a little straighter when someone mentioned it. But the money had come with a shadow. The moment a man becomes rich, he stops being able to tell which people came for the man and which people came for the wealth. The rooms fill up. The phone never stops. The smiles are perfect. And under all of it, underneath every handshake and every birthday dinner and every woman who calls with a warm voice, there is a question a rich man cannot answer until it is too late. Did they come for me? Or did they come for what I built? Emeka had answered that question too slowly with Ronki. Ronka had been elegant, intelligent, and precise in all the ways that impressed a man who respected precision. She had arrived in his life at 34, when he was already successful but still hungry. And she had told him she loved the version of him that was always working, always pushing, always building. She had said those things in the same month she began wearing a watch that cost what his first office rent had cost for a full year. He had not connected the two things. He had been in love. Love is the condition that makes a person stop doing the arithmetic they are usually best at. When Ronk left, she did not leave alone. She left with a business associate she had met through Emeka's own network, a man who had built nothing but was comfortable spending what others built. She did not leave crying. She left in a calm, organized way that told Emeka she had been planning it for some time. The last thing she said to him, the sentence that stayed inside him long after everything else faded, was this: "You are a good man, Emeka, but a good man is not enough if he cannot maintain the life." He had a house worth 600 million naira, 4 cars, 2 foreign accounts. She meant he could not maintain her. After that, Emeka maintained his walls. He dated carefully and briefly. He gave nothing important. Women came close and felt the distance and eventually stopped trying to cross it. His mother prayed about it openly, which meant loudly, at every Sunday visit. His business partner Goke told him he was becoming the kind of man who would die surrounded by assets and no one who actually knew him. Emeka listened politely to both of them and changed nothing. And then, standing alone in his father's empty old house one afternoon, he had an idea. The house in the old part of Akura had been sitting untouched for 6 years. When his parents moved to the new home Emeka had built them in a better part of the city, the old house simply waited, gathering dust and memory. It was a solid house, built in the 80s with concrete that did not apologize, but 6 years of no occupant had roughed it up. The roof leaked in the back room. A kitchen pipe had burst and left a dark stain down the wall that nobody had repaired because nobody lived there. The garden went to grass. The gate rusted in a way that made it sing every time it opened. Emeka had gone to inspect it one afternoon and found himself standing in the empty parlor for an hour, not thinking about renovation, thinking about something else entirely. The thing he could not trust about the women who came into his life now was that they all arrived already knowing what he was worth. They had searched his name. They had seen the company profile. They had done the calculation before they agreed to dinner. There was no moment of being simply a man. There was only being Emeka Adeyemi of Adeyemi Properties. But what if there was a man named Emeka who lived in an old house with a leaking roof? A man who drove a modest car and wore ordinary clothes and had no obvious wealth to announce. Would a woman love that man? Would she stay? Would she sweep a veranda without being asked? He called Gok from the driveway. "I have an idea," he said. "Your ideas always cost something," Gok replied. "This one costs nothing. I am going to spend time in my father's old house. Keep it as it is. Old, plain, no show. Any woman I am seriously considering, I will bring her here first. Not the Lagos house, not the Abuja apartment. Here." Silence on the line. "You want to test women with a leaking roof," Gok said. "I want to see what a woman is made of when she thinks there is nothing to gain," Emeka said. "Anyone can behave well in a beautiful house. I want to see who she is in a broken one." Gok was quiet again. Then, And what exactly are you looking for? Emeka looked at his father's house. He thought about brown shoes worn for 11 years. I will know it when I see it, he said. He was not wrong. What he underestimated was how long it would take to find it. Over the following months, he brought 3 women to the old house in Akure. The first was Adas, a marketing executive from Lagos who had met him at a business conference and pursued him with a strategic warmth he had almost let himself believe was genuine. Adais arrived already performing disappointment before she crossed the threshold. Inside, she walked through every room with an expression that tried to be neutral and failed. She mentioned the leak twice, the paint 3 times, and by the second hour had gently suggested he might want to consider upgrading at some point. She did not offer to help with anything. She left before dinner and sent a message the next day that said she was not really a small town girl at heart. The second was a woman his mother sent, a family friend's daughter who arrived with the confidence of someone who had already told her own mother she was going to marry well before she knew who she was marrying. She saw the house and saw poverty. She was kind enough not to say so with words. She said it by shortening her visit and forgetting to bring the overnight bag she had mentioned. The third was the one who recorded herself. Tenny, beautiful, precise, completely invested in the version of Emeka she had constructed in her mind. Tenny sat in the old parlor and held a long conversation about what could be done with the house if someone had the right renovation budget, which told Emeka whose name that renovation was happening under. When he stepped away to take a call, she took out her phone and began filming herself in the broken house in a way that suggested she was already composing the caption. He saw her through the corridor. He said nothing. He brought her a glass of water and changed the subject, and drove her back to the park that evening with a smile she took for shyness. That night, he sat in his father's old parlor alone and understood that the test would find the right answer if the right woman ever came through the gate. He simply had not found her yet. He found her the way a person finds something they were not looking for. She was simply there when he looked up. It was a Saturday morning in the Akure market, which he was passing through on foot because his driver had taken the car for a service. He was stopped in front of a provision stall, trying to remember if he needed salt, when a woman backed into him while reaching for something on the top shelf and knocked the basket out of his hand. She turned around and said immediately, without checking who she had knocked into, I am so sorry. Please let me. And she bent down and began picking up his items from the dusty floor before he had even moved. Her name was Zara. She told him this because the stall owner called it out to greet her, and because Emeka asked, and because she was the kind of person who answered direct questions directly. She was 29. A secondary school biology teacher, with a voice that moved at the same pace whether she was talking about something small or something large. There was no performance in her. That was the first thing he noticed. The second was that she continued helping him collect his items, even after it was clear they were strangers, and when she handed him the last tin, she looked at it carefully and said, "Check if it is dented. They will exchange it for you if it is." And then she went back to her own shopping without waiting for thanks. He bought his things. He walked out. He came back and bought something he did not need and managed to end up in the same aisle twice more before he said, "I think I would like to see you again, if that is all right." She looked at him for a moment as if she was genuinely considering it, rather than performing consideration. Then she said, "You can have my number, but I should tell you, I do not have a lot of free time. I mark exams on weekends." "I do not need a lot of your time," he said. "Yet." She almost smiled at the yet. Almost. Emeka did something he had not done since his late 20s. He went slowly. He called when he said he would call. He listened more than he spoke in the early weeks, which was not a strategy, but a genuine response to the fact that Zara kept surprising him. She talked about her students the way people talk about things they genuinely care about. She argued with him about a film they watched separately and called each other about. Argued with a specific and unhurried certainty that was not trying to impress him. She paid for things sometimes before he could, not to make a point, but because she had got there first. He did not mention the properties. He did not mention the company. He wore modest clothes, drove a modest car. He told her he worked in construction, which was true, and when she asked if business was good, he said, "It is okay. I manage," which was the most creative interpretation of the truth he had offered anyone in years. Zara did not search for him online. He asked her about this later, when the time came for everything between them to be honest, and she said simply, "Because I was interested in you, not in what you had done." She said it without making it sound like a virtue. She said it the way she said most things, like it was simply the obvious fact of the matter. Over 3 months, Emeka Adeyemi fell in love with a woman who had never seen his address. That was the rarest thing that had happened to him in 15 years. Which is why, on a quiet Friday evening, he drove to Akure alone, opened the old house, turned on the one ceiling fan that still worked, and called Zara. "I want to show you something," he said. "A place that is important to me. Will you come this weekend?" She arrived with garden eggs wrapped in a polythene bag because she had passed a woman selling them on the road and thought a man living alone might not be eating well. She stood at the gate and knocked twice. One knock, a pause, a second knock. And when it took him a moment to get to the door, she did not knock a third time. She simply waited. When the gate swung open and sang on its rust, she looked at it with interest. Not horror, interest. Inside the compound, she looked around the way a person looks at a place they are trying to understand rather than judge. The house was solid but worn. The outer paint had faded from what had once been creamed to something closer to old paper. The garden to the left had gone its own way for a season too many. The veranda had a crack running along one side that someone had once painted over, and the paint had not hidden it. "Your family house?" she asked. "My father's," Emeka said. She nodded as if that explained the feeling of the place, which it did. She unwrapped the garden eggs and placed them on the kitchen table, while he showed her through the rooms. When they reached the back room with the ceiling stain from the old leak, she looked at it for a moment and then at him. "Has the leak been fixed or just the ceiling?" "Just the ceiling," he said. She said. "Fix the roof first, otherwise you are only decorating the problem." It was such a practical thing to say. He stood there and felt something unlock quietly inside his chest. They spent the afternoon in the house. He had bought food but had no clear plan. And Zara, finding the situation as it was, simply tied her cloth around her waist and began cooking the way someone cooks in a functional kitchen, dealing with what was there. The stove was old. One burner was unreliable. She used the reliable one and adjusted her timing. She did not complain about the stove. She simply adapted to it. She asked him about the photograph on the parlor wall. His parents on their wedding day, young and solemn and proud. He told her about his father, the brown shoes worn 11 years, the teaching certificate, the way his father had believed that dignity was not what you owned, but how you carried yourself inside what you had. Emeka had not talked about his father like that to anyone in years, and was surprised to find himself doing it now. Zara listened the way people listen when they are not waiting to speak. When he finished, she said quietly, "He sounds like someone worth missing." "Yes," Emeka said, "he is." After they ate, she swept the veranda without being asked, not because she thought he expected it, because the broom was leaning against the wall, and the veranda had dry leaves on it, and sweeping it was simply the next sensible thing to do in a house where you were a guest. Emeka stood in the doorway and watched her, and what he felt was not gratitude, though he was grateful. It was recognition. The feeling of looking at something and knowing, without needing to calculate it, that it is real. The second visit, 3 weeks later, brought a storm. He had not planned for it. She arrived on a Saturday carrying a container of beans she had cooked that morning because she had made too much and it would spoil alone. The storm came in the afternoon, sudden and heavy, the kind that turns a Nigerian sky black in 40 minutes. The power went with it. The old generator produced only the amber, slightly too warm light of a machine that had not been recently serviced. They sat in that amber light with rain hammering the corrugated roof and the smell of wet earth coming through the window, and they talked for 3 hours. He learned that her mother had raised her and a younger brother alone after her father left, not died, left, which was its own kind of wound, the kind that leaves questions instead of answers. He learned that she had chosen teaching not because it was the available option, but because she had once had a teacher who showed up for her during the worst year of her life. And she had decided then that she wanted to be the kind of presence that shows up. He learned that she sent a portion of her salary home every month without being asked, and that this was not a sacrifice in her mind. It was simply what you did for the people who carried you before you could carry yourself. She learned things about him too, the real things, the years of early mornings and late nights, the very first contract, a small road repair in a neighborhood nobody wanted to touch, that he had done with such care that a government official driving past had stopped, asked questions, made a call. The loneliness underneath the success that he did not name as loneliness, but which was visible in the way he talked about arriving home to a house that held everything money could put in it and still felt like an empty container. When the storm finally slowed, Zara looked out at the wet compound and said quietly, almost to herself, "I could be very comfortable in a house like this." He turned to look at her. She met his eyes, unaware of the weight of what she had just said. "Not because of what it is," she added, "because of how it feels. Like it has memory. like the walls have been paying attention to something. He proposed to her the next morning, not on one knee, across the breakfast table with the old ceiling fan turning above them. He said, "I need to tell you the truth about some things first, and then I need to ask you something. Are you ready?" She set down her cup. "Tell me the truth first," she said. "Then I will be ready for the question." He told her everything. He watched her face as the number of properties moved from one to several. He watched her expression shift as the company came into focus. He told it plainly, without drama, the way a man tells the truth he is not ashamed of, but is not proud of hiding either. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "The old house," she said finally. "The test." "Yes." She nodded slowly. She picked up her cup and drank. She set it down. She looked out at the morning compound, still damp from the night's rain. "I am not angry," she said. "I understand why you did it, but I want you to understand what you were actually testing. You thought you were asking whether I wanted your money. But what you were really asking was whether I could love you when you offered me nothing worth pretending for." She looked at him steadily. The answer to that question was yes from the second month. You did not need a broken house to find it out. You only needed to ask me. He had nothing to say. He felt it land in the place behind his chest where true things land. "Now ask me the question," she said. "Will you marry me?" he said. "Yes," she said, the way she said everything, quietly, completely, without needing the room to see it. Love is simple between two people who have chosen each other. It becomes complicated when it enters other people's houses. Emeka's mother, Mrs. Adeyemi, was a woman who had spent her life working too hard and earning too little, and had concluded from this experience that the most important thing a woman could secure was stable ground. When she heard her son had proposed to a secondary school teacher with no family of weight and no obvious connections, she asked God quietly what she had done to deserve this. Out loud, she was more diplomatic. She said she wanted to meet the girl. She said she was sure she was a lovely person, but she said these things in a tone that added a sentence she never spoke, that she would be the one to decide. His cousin Biodun was less diplomatic. Biodun was the kind of family member who did not belong to any meeting, but always managed to be present at every important one, offering opinions nobody requested with the full confidence of someone whose opinions had always been welcomed. Biodun had a friend whose daughter was educated abroad and unattached, and had been floated near Emeka before. When Zara was announced, Biodun began the small, consistent work of doubt. She is unknown. She is just a teacher. What does she bring? A man like Emeka needs a woman who can move in his world. And then came the complication Emeka had not planned for. Ronki came back, not because she loved him. She appeared at a mutual gathering where she had calculated Emeka would be, stood near enough to be unavoidable, smiled the way she smiled, without her eyes, and said he looked well, said she had thought about him, said some things deserved a second chance. He looked at her and felt the old thing, faintly, the way you feel the echo of a fire when only ashes left. And then his phone lit up with a message from Zara that said only, "I made jollof, Come and eat before it gets cold. He said goodbye to Ronki with a politeness that had no warmth in it and walked to his car. But Biodun had seen Ronka at the gathering, and Biodun, who had never done one useful thing, managed to do the one harmful thing available. She told Emeka's mother about it, not the truth of it, her version of it. By the time the story reached Mrs. Adeyemi, it had grown into something it was not. That Emeka had spent an hour with his former girlfriend and left with her. The mother, already uncertain about the teacher from Akure, made a decision in her parlor that would cost her 6 months of a relationship with her son. She called Zara without telling Emeka. She called with the controlled politeness of a woman who has already decided and is wrapping the decision in courtesy. She said she wanted a conversation, woman to woman. She said she was not against the relationship. She mentioned that there were perhaps women better positioned to support a man of Emeka's standing. She suggested, very carefully, that a teacher on a government salary might struggle to provide certain things a man in his world required. She did not call her a gold digger. She was too careful for that. But what she communicated, underneath every measured syllable, was that Zara was insufficient, that she had come from the wrong direction, that she should remove herself before the family did it for her. Zara listened to the entire call without interrupting. When it was finished, she said, "Thank you for calling, Ma. I have heard everything. I am going to tell Emeka about this conversation because I will not begin a marriage by keeping things from him. I respect you as his mother, and I want you to know that I am not going anywhere. Not because I am stubborn, but because your son asked me to stay, and I gave him my word. I hope that with time, you will allow me to show you who I am instead of deciding before you know me." Then she called Emeka. She told him everything, exactly as it had happened. A man who has spent his life building things knows the difference between a wall you knock down and a wall you stand in front of. Emeka drove to his mother's house that evening, not with anger, with the clarity that comes when a man has finally decided what he is choosing and makes the choice without confusion. He sat across from his mother and said, "You called the woman I am going to marry and asked her to remove herself from my life. She told me about it immediately, which should tell you everything you need to know about her character. I am here to tell you that it will not work, and I need you to understand why." His mother began to speak about what was best for him. He let her finish. Then he said, "You spent your whole life, you and Baba, making sure I had more than you had. You gave me everything you could carry. And the thing I found, the thing I actually found, with no one's help, is a woman who loved me in a house with a leaking roof. She sat in Baba's broken house and told me to fix the roof before the ceiling. She swept the veranda because the broom was there and the leaves needed to go. She told me the truth the same day she learned it, even when the truth was hard. I have been rich for 10 years, and I have never found that in any room I paid to be in. I need you to stop trying to take it from me." Mrs. Adeyemi was silent for a long time. She was not a bad woman. She was a woman who had confused protection with control. But her son was sitting in front of her, and his eyes were clearer than she had seen them in a very long time. she said finally. Bring her here on Sunday. Let me know her for myself. Zara arrived for Sunday lunch in a simple dress and with a pot of ofada stew she had made that morning. Mrs. Adeyemi received her with a careful courtesy that had not yet become warmth. She showed her through the house with the manner of a woman observing. She watched how Zara moved, how she greeted, what her eyes did in each room. Midway through the afternoon, the neighbor arrived at the door unexpectedly with a sick grandchild, a small child burning with fever, and a mother too frightened to think clearly. Nobody in the room quite knew what to do. Zara stood up before anyone else had processed the situation. She checked the child's temperature with the back of her wrist. She asked 3 careful questions. She spoke to the mother in a calm and steady voice, told her what the fever was likely doing and what it was not doing, told her what to give and how much, told her the signs that would mean a hospital trip was necessary. Then she held the child for 20 minutes, while the mother called the father and the medicine was located. She did all of it without fuss, without looking around to see who was watching, without once checking whether Mrs. Adeyemi was in the room. Mrs. Adeyemi was in the room. When the neighbor finally left, calmer, with her grandchild and her medicine, and her clearer understanding of what was happening, the older woman sat down slowly and looked at Zara for a long moment. "You are a teacher," she said. "Yes, Ma." "But you knew all of that?" "My mother," Zara said simply. "She could not always afford the clinic. So I read, so I would know what to do when she could not go." Mrs. Adeyemi was silent. And in that silence, 6 months of resistance dissolved the way resistance dissolves when a person finally stops fighting a truth they have spent too long refusing to see. She reached out and took Zara's hand. "I called you," she said. "I told you that you were not the right person for my son. I measured you with the wrong ruler." Zara held the older woman's hand between both of hers. "There is nothing to forgive, Ma," she said gently. "You love him. That is why you were careful. I would rather have a mother-in-law who loves him too much than one who does not love him at all." Mrs. Adeyemi laughed, a surprised, genuine laugh, and held the girl's hands tighter. Biodun, who had come to Sunday lunch expecting a confrontation and had found something she could not write a caption for, quietly picked up her bag and left before anyone asked what she had contributed. They married in a cour, not in the largest hall, not with the longest guest list, in a ceremony that had exactly the number of people who were supposed to be there. He stood at the front and watched her come down the aisle in a dress the color of warm ivory, and she walked the way she did everything, without hurry, without performance, with her eyes on him, the way someone looks at a thing they have already decided about. He said his vow in his own words because he could not say what he meant in anyone else's. "I built things for 15 years, and I could not build something I trusted to be real. I walked into an old house with a leaking roof looking for the truth, and you showed up with garden eggs because you thought I might be hungry. I want to spend my life being the man who deserved that. I am not sure I do yet, but I am going to spend every day trying." She said hers simply. "I did not fall in love with what you had. I fell in love with what you were inside that old house when you thought showing me the difficult version of your life was a risk. It was not a risk. It was the truest thing you ever showed me. I am going to keep loving that man, the one who knows what his father's brown shoes cost, the one who counted on me without telling me I was being counted on. That is the man I am promising myself to. Guard the ones who love you when you are giving them nothing but yourself. They are the only ones who will still be there when the self is all that remains. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe and join our growing family of story lovers. Your support keeps these stories alive, and there is another powerful story waiting for you right now. Go ahead and watch it. I promise it is worth your time.